The message popped up while I was standing in the kitchen, holding the plate of pot roast I had just finished making. Still steaming, still waiting for Cole to walk through the door. She's not as smart as she thinks. We'll handle the house after the baby comes. My mother-in-law, Sylvia, had sent that to the family group chat. The same group chat she clearly forgot I was still in. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My husband's name appeared right below her message. 3 dots. Typing. Stopping. Typing again. Then his reply came through. Just be patient. She'll sign anything if I push the right way. Something inside me went very, very quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes before tears. The kind that comes before a decision. This was not a joke. This was not venting. This was a plan about my house, my money, my life. I scrolled up slowly, my fingers trembling against the screen. And that was when I realized this had been going on for months. The front door opened. Cole walked in, smiling like he owned the world. I smiled back. My name is Claudia. I was 34 years old, owned my home outright, and had spent the last 2 years believing I had finally built something real and lasting with someone who truly deserved it. I set the plate on the counter and turned to greet Cole like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just read the most painful message of my life. Like my chest wasn't caving in on itself. It smells amazing in here, Cole said, dropping his bag by the door. I smiled. I made your favorite. We sat at the table. He talked about his day, a meeting that ran late, traffic on the bridge. I nodded. I laughed at the right moments. I even reached across and touched his hand. And the whole time I was watching him. Really watching him. The way his eyes moved when he talked. The ease in his voice. He was so comfortable. So confident. He had no idea what I had read. That night after he fell asleep, I took my phone into the bathroom and locked the door. I opened the group chat and began screenshotting every single message, going back 4 months. Every cruel word. Every plan. Every joke made at my expense. I created a hidden folder deep inside my phone and labeled it, Recipes. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was strategy. The next morning, Cole came downstairs while I was making coffee. He sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, looking relaxed. Then casually, like the thought had just occurred to him, he said, "Hey, I've been thinking. Maybe we should talk about our finances. Plan properly for the future." I kept my back to him and poured the coffee slowly. "What do you mean?" "Just like joint planning. Who handles what? I think it makes more sense for me to manage the bigger stuff. I'm better with numbers." I turned around and handed him his mug. I let a small, uncertain smile cross my face. The kind that said I was flattered he was thinking about our future together. "You're probably right," I said softly. "I've never really been good with all that." His eyes lit up. Just slightly. Just enough for me to see it clearly. He thought I was exactly where he wanted me. Confused, trusting, and easy to lead. I took a sip of my coffee and looked out the window. He had no idea he had just handed me the first piece of evidence I needed. That evening after Cole went to the gym, I sat on the bed with my phone and went through the group chat again. This time I wasn't just reading. I was building a timeline. I went all the way back past 4 months, past 6 months. My hands started to shake when I reached a conversation from before our wedding. Sylvia had written, "Once the ring is on her finger, the house becomes part of the picture. We just need to be smart about it." Cole had replied with a laughing emoji. "Then don't worry. She trusts me completely." I put my phone face down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. He hadn't fallen into this plan. He had helped build it. Before the wedding. Before the vows. Before he held my hand at the altar and looked into my eyes and promised to love and protect me. I had walked into that marriage believing I was building a life. They had been treating it like a business arrangement from the very beginning. I breathed slowly. In. Out. The anger had to wait. Right now I needed to think. A week passed. I kept watching. Kept listening. Then I found a message that made my stomach drop in a way none of the others had. Sylvia had written, "The pregnancy will make everything easier. Once there's a baby, she won't fight anything. She'll be too tired, too scared. It's the perfect time to get the documents signed." Cole had replied, "I know. I've been working on it." I sat with that message for a long time. Because here was the thing, I wasn't pregnant. Not even close. But suddenly all the little things started making sense. The way Sylvia kept hugging me and whispering that she couldn't wait to be a grandmother. The way Cole had been talking more about our future family. The gentle pressure that had been quietly building around me for months. They had been nudging me toward pregnancy on purpose. Not because they wanted a baby. Because they wanted me vulnerable. Distracted. Legally tied down in a way that made fighting back feel completely impossible. I closed the chat and set my phone aside. They had no idea what kind of woman they were truly dealing with. 2 days later, I told Cole I was visiting my old college friend Trisha across town. Instead, I drove to a law office I had found online, small, quiet, run by a sharp-eyed attorney named Mr. Harmon who specialized in family and property law. I sat across from his desk and placed my phone in front of him. I had organized the screenshots by date. For months of messages. Time-stamped. Clear. Impossible to misread. He went through them in silence. His expression stayed mostly neutral, but I noticed the exact moment it shifted, when he reached the section about the documents, the hidden financial planning, the pregnancy strategy. He looked up at me over his glasses. "This isn't just a difficult marriage," he said quietly. "This is premeditated financial manipulation. There is clear intent here. A pattern. If even half of what is in these messages is accurate, you have a very strong case." I exhaled slowly. It was the first time in weeks that I felt something other than fear. "What do I do?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. "You keep playing along," he said. "And you let them come to you." I followed Mr. Harmon's advice carefully. When I got home that evening, I was warm and cheerful. I kissed Cole on the cheek and asked about his day. Normal. Easy. Completely unthreatening. Then, a few evenings later, I brought up the finances myself. I sat beside Cole on the couch and leaned into him the way I used to when things between us still felt real. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him. "About joint planning. Think you're right. I want us to feel secure. Especially if we're thinking about starting a family soon." His whole body relaxed. I felt it happen. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah. But I don't really understand how it all works, joint ownership, who holds what. Can you explain it to me?" And he did. He talked for almost 20 minutes. He explained, nearly word for word, exactly what his mother had laid out in the group chat. The house. The accounts. The transfers. He made it all sound so caring, so responsible, so completely natural. He didn't realize he was handing me a detailed confession, wrapped neatly in a warm smile and carefully rehearsed love. I listened to every single word. Mr. Harmon had suggested I look carefully at our financial records. So I did. I had always handled the household budgeting, paying the bills, tracking groceries, managing the small joint account we use for shared expenses. Cole had never paid much attention to any of that, which meant he had never wondered why I sometimes sat at the dining table with a laptop and a notebook late in the evening. I started going back through the bank statements, month by month. Quiet, patient, thorough. That was when I found it. Small amounts at first. 50 here. 100 there. Transfers to an account number I didn't recognize. Then, as the months went on, the amounts grew. 300. 500. Once just over 1,000. A hidden account. My name wasn't on it. Cole had been quietly pulling money from our household. Not dramatically, not in one obvious move, but steadily and consistently over time. I printed every statement and placed them in a folder I kept at the back of my wardrobe, buried behind a stack of old sweaters. The picture was becoming clearer with every page I turned. He hadn't just planned to take the house. He had already started. Sylvia arrived on a Sunday afternoon, unannounced, carrying a fruit basket and a wide smile. She hugged me at the door like I was her favorite person in the world. She smelled like expensive perfume and fresh lies. "I just wanted to come and see my daughter-in-law," she said sweetly, squeezing both my hands. "I feel like we don't spend nearly enough time together." I smiled back. "Come in. I'll make tea." We sat in the living room while Cole was upstairs. Sylvia complimented the curtains, the throw pillows, the way I had arranged the bookshelf. She was warm and attentive and completely convincing. Then very naturally, she turned to me with soft eyes and said, "So, any news yet? Any little ones on the way?" I gave her the shy, slightly embarrassed smile of a woman who very much wanted a baby but hadn't yet been blessed with one. "Not yet," I said quietly. But we're hopeful. Her face opened up like a flower turning toward sunlight. She patted my hand. Don't worry. It will happen soon. And when it does, everything will fall into place. I nodded gently, keeping my eyes warm and trusting. She had no idea I had read every single message she had ever sent about me. The week after Sylvia's visit, I moved quietly and carefully. Mr. Harmon had advised me to secure my personal assets before things progressed any further. So I did. The house was in my name. I had bought it 2 years before Cole and I got married, using money I had saved over 5 hard years of working double shifts and living carefully. That was the entire reason Sylvia had started calling me the investment in those early messages. That was what this whole plan had always been about. I opened a new personal account at a bank I had never used before. I transferred my savings from my individual account, the one Cole didn't have access to, into the new one. I photographed every important document. The property papers, my business registration, my investment certificates. I stored digital copies in a secure cloud folder protected by a password only I knew. I was not frantic. I was not panicking. I moved like someone who had thought everything through at least 3 times before acting once. If they were going to try to strip me of everything I had built, I was going to make very sure there was nothing left to take. It happened on a Thursday evening. Cole came home from work in a particularly good mood. He brought takeout, my favorite, and poured us both a drink. We ate together, laughing, relaxed. I almost felt sad for a moment. Almost. After dinner, he reached into his work bag and pulled out a folded set of papers. Hey, so I spoke to a financial advisor, he said, keeping his voice light. He put together a simple agreement just to streamline things between us. Makes it easier for us to plan together, protect each other. Nothing complicated. He slid the papers toward me with a casual smile. I picked them up and flipped slowly through a few pages, letting my eyes move across the words. I made a small, thoughtful expression. This looks a bit long, I said. Can I take some time to go through it properly? I want to make sure I understand everything before I sign. He shrugged easily. Of course. Take your time. I folded the papers back up neatly and smiled at him. The next morning, I slipped them carefully into my bag and drove straight to Mr. Harmon's office. Mr. Harmon put on his reading glasses and took his time going through the document carefully. I sat across from him and watched his face. He was a calm man, even-tempered, unhurried. But I noticed his jaw tighten once, then twice, before he set the papers down. He folded his hands on the desk. If you had signed this, he said, you would have transferred effective financial control of your home to your husband. There is language buried on page 7 that would give him authority to make binding decisions about the property without your individual consent. There is also a clause on page 9 that would redirect a portion of your personal income into a shared account that he could access independently. I stared at him. He would have had control of nearly everything within 6 months, Mr. Harmon said. I exhaled slowly. I had suspected, but hearing it clearly out loud still felt like a blow. What now? I asked. Mr. Harmon smiled, the calm, steady smile of a man who had seen situations like this before and knew exactly what came next. Now, he said, setting down a fresh notepad, we start building a trap of our own. From that point on, I became the perfect wife. Not the real version of me, the woman who worked hard and thought clearly and had once trusted too deeply. I became the version they had always assumed I was. Soft, a little naive, and very easy to lead. I asked Cole's opinion on things I already had clear answers to. I pretended to forget financial terms he had explained. I laughed warmly at Sylvia's suggestions like they were the most helpful things I had ever heard. I was agreeable and warm and just slightly dependent on both of them. And it worked. In the family group chat, which I checked every single day without either of them knowing, Sylvia sent a message one afternoon that made me press my hand over my mouth to stop myself from laughing out loud. She wrote, "She's so easy. I don't know why I was ever worried. Cole, this is going to be simpler than we thought." Cole replied with a thumbs up emoji. Easy. That was what they believed I was. I set my phone down and returned to the notes I had been quietly organizing for Mr. Harmon, dates, amounts, voice recordings, screenshots. All of it clean. All of it completely legal. Mr. Harmon had told me that documentation was everything in a case like mine. So I became very careful about every important conversation that took place inside our home. One evening, about 3 weeks after the document incident, Cole was on the phone in the living room. I was in the kitchen, but the walls in our house were thin and Cole had never learned to lower his voice when he felt comfortable and safe. "No, she hasn't questioned anything," he said. "Once everything is in my name, I'll make the move. It'll be clean." I pressed record on my phone and set it quietly on the kitchen counter, angled toward the open doorway. He talked for another 11 minutes. He mentioned the house. He mentioned the accounts. He even laughed, a low, relaxed laugh, and said, "She actually thinks I'm doing this for us. It's almost too easy." When he hung up, I heard him settle into the couch and turn on the television. I stopped the recording and transferred it immediately to my secure cloud folder. I stood in the kitchen for a long, still moment, letting the full weight of his words settle around me. Then I quietly went back to washing the dishes. I had told myself I could handle whatever I found. I had prepared for betrayal. I had made peace in my own quiet way with the fact that the man I married had been planning to use me all along. But nothing quite prepared me for what I read on a late Tuesday night. I was going through the group chat, just checking the way I did every couple of days, when I came across a message exchange from about 3 weeks before. Sylvia had written, "What about Amber? She's been asking about you." Cole had replied, "Not yet, but soon. Once the house situation is sorted." Sylvia, "She's so much better suited. You know that." Cole, "I know." I read it 3 times. Then I sat very still on the edge of the bed, in the dark, with the phone screen the only light in the room. There was someone else. A woman Sylvia approved of. Someone he planned to be with once I was out of the picture. Their exact words from months earlier finally making complete sense. I wasn't just being robbed. I was being replaced. I didn't cry. I was genuinely surprised by that. Maybe I had already been grieving this marriage without fully realizing it. Or maybe the part of me that felt things had quietly stepped aside to let the part of me that acted take over completely. I called Mr. Harmon the next morning. We met that afternoon. I laid everything on the table, the screenshots from the very beginning to the most recent messages, the printed bank statements, the financial records, the 2 recordings I had made at home. All of it organized by date and labeled clearly. Mr. Harmon went through each item without rushing. When he finished, he looked up at me with steady, calm eyes. "This is a comprehensive case," he said. "Financial misconduct, premeditated asset manipulation, recorded admissions. You have more than enough to proceed. What do we do next?" I asked. "We prepare the counter document," he said. "When he brings the original agreement back to you, and he will very soon, you hand him a different one. One that looks similar enough on the outside that he will not bother to read it carefully." He slid a carefully prepared draft across the desk toward me. "He will not see it coming," Mr. Harmon said. "Picked it up. Good." Cole brought it up again on a Friday evening. I had been quietly waiting for it. He came home relaxed and warm, the way he always was when he genuinely believed things were moving in his direction. After dinner, while we were sitting together on the couch, he reached over and gently touched my hand. "Hey," he said. "Have you had a chance to think any more about that document I showed you? The financial planning one?" I looked at him with wide, open eyes. "I have actually. I talked to a friend about it, just to make sure I understood it properly." I paused, then added a small, trusting smile. "I think I'm ready to sign." His whole expression changed. Not dramatically, but I had been watching him closely enough by then to see it clearly. A quiet, controlled satisfaction settling across his face. The kind that comes from feeling like a long plan is finally landing exactly where it was always meant to. He nodded slowly. "I'm glad. It really is just for our security." "I know," I said softly. He squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. "Should we do it this weekend?" he asked. "My mom would love to be there." I said yes without hesitating. The signing was set for Saturday afternoon. Sylvia arrived early, dressed like she was attending a small celebration, because in her mind she absolutely was. She hugged me at the door, touched my face with both hands, called me sweetheart. Cole sat up at the dining table. He brought out the original document, the same one I had taken to Mr. Harmon. He smoothed it flat on the table in front of me and uncapped a pen with a quiet air of ceremony. I looked at the papers. Then I looked up at him with a calm, easy smile. Actually, I said, reaching into the folder I had carried from the bedroom, I had my own copy printed. Would you mind just quickly checking it's the same? I marked a few spots where I want to make sure I understand the language. I slid Mr. Harmon's counter document across the table. Cole barely glanced at it. He flipped to the last page, skimming the way he had always expected me to skim things. Found the signature line. Signed his name with a relaxed, flowing hand. Sylvia watched from her chair, smiling broadly. I watched Cole sign away every advantage he thought he was about to gain, and hand me in the process the legal instrument I needed to end everything. I let 2 full seconds of silence pass after his pen left the paper. Then I picked up my phone from the table. Before we celebrate, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level, there's something I'd like to show you both. I opened the screenshot folder and turned the screen toward Cole first. He leaned in. His expression was politely curious. Then his eyes found the first message, Sylvia's words clearly visible, the group chat name at the top of the screen, the timestamp impossible to question. I watched the color leave his face slowly, the way light fades from a room when a thick cloud passes across the sun. That's... He started. Keep reading, I said. I swiped to the next screenshot. Then the next. Month after month. His words, her words, their careful plan laid out entirely in their own language, their own confidence that I would never see any of it. Sylvia stood up sharply from her chair. This is completely out of context. There are 47 screenshots, I said. All time-stamped. All saved to a third-party server that I don't control alone. I set the phone down on the table and looked directly at Cole. Your turn, I said. Sylvia started talking fast, the way people do when they feel the ground disappearing rapidly beneath their feet. It was taken out of context. It was only venting. Families say things they don't truly mean. She had always loved me. This was all one enormous misunderstanding. I let her finish completely. Then I picked up my phone and opened the audio recordings. Cole's voice filled the dining room. Once everything is in my name, I'll make the move. It'll be clean. Then the laugh. Low and unhurried. The comfortable laugh of a man who believed he was entirely safe. She actually thinks I'm doing this for us. It's almost too easy. The recording ran for nearly 4 minutes. Every word crisp and clear. Every admission completely unmistakable. When it ended, the room was so quiet I could hear the kitchen clock ticking steadily on the wall. Sylvia sat back down heavily in her chair. She looked at Cole. He was staring at the surface of the table, jaw tight, completely still. For the first time since all of this had started, I felt the power in the room shift entirely over to my side. It didn't happen loudly or dramatically. It happened in that silence. I reached across the table and picked up the document Cole had signed just minutes earlier. I think we should talk about what you actually agreed to, I said. He looked up slowly. There was something hollow in his eyes now, like a man beginning to understand the full depth of a fall he had never seen coming. I held the document open and read clearly from one of the sections Mr. Harmon had prepared with great care. The document Cole had signed was not a financial planning agreement. It was a legally binding acknowledgement, drafted carefully, that confirmed Cole's awareness of the hidden account, transferred his claim on the house back to sole ownership in my name, and included specific language that would support all evidence of financial misconduct in divorce proceedings. He had signed it without reading a single full paragraph. Exactly the way he had planned for me to sign his version. Your lawyer will need a copy of this, I said, setting it back on the table between us. Cole's hands were completely flat on the surface. Still, he didn't speak. He didn't seem to have any words left. Sylvia looked between us, her face blank and unreadable. I'd like you both to leave now, I said quietly. Cole didn't leave immediately. He went through several different versions of himself in the space of about 10 minutes. First he apologized. His voice cracked. He said he had made a terrible and unforgivable mistake. He said none of it had been real, that his mother had pushed him into the entire scheme, that deep down he had never truly wanted to hurt me. I said nothing. Then he turned angry briefly, sharply. He said I had trapped him, that I had been calculating, that I had gone behind his back to set him up. I let him say everything he needed to say. Then Sylvia, who had been sitting completely silently through all of it, made a sharp sound of disgust and looked at her son with cold, hard eyes. "You handled this terribly," she said, her voice cutting. "I told you to be more careful." Cole turned to stare at her. And just like that, their alliance split right down the middle. They began arguing with each other in hushed, vicious tones, the way two people argue when they are both guilty and both desperately searching for someone else to carry the blame. I stood up from the table, picked up my folder, and walked calmly to the bedroom to begin packing. I didn't rush. There was something deeply important to me about not rushing, about leaving in complete control, taking only what I needed, because everything that truly mattered had already been secured long before this moment. I had packed an overnight bag 2 weeks earlier, the same night I realized the case was nearly ready to move forward. It had been sitting at the very back of the wardrobe, tucked behind those old sweaters, right beside the document folder I had already moved to Trisha's house for careful safekeeping. I pulled the bag out, changed out of my clothes and put on something comfortable. I gathered my laptop, my important documents, my phone charger, and a few personal things that had always been mine alone. I could still hear them arguing downstairs, low strained voices bleeding steadily through the floor. I took one last look around the bedroom. The house was mine. My name had been on the title long before Cole had ever been part of my life. His plan had always required me to willingly give it all up. I never had. I walked down the stairs without rushing, past the dining room without looking in, opened the front door. Outside, the evening air was cool and completely quiet. I walked to my car, placed my bag in the back seat and drove away. The legal process took 4 months. Mr. Harmon filed for divorce on my behalf the following Monday morning. The screenshots, the bank statements, the printed financial records, the recordings, and the signed counter document all became part of the formal case. Cole's legal team tried at first to argue that the recordings were not admissible, but the relevant laws were clear, and Mr. Harmon had been thoroughly meticulous about every detail from the very beginning. The hidden account was traced and properly audited. Every transfer was documented and accounted for. Cole was ordered to repay the full amount that had been moved without my knowledge or consent. He lost his claim on the house completely, not that he had ever held a real legal one. But any arguments he might have attempted in a contested divorce were shut down firmly and quickly by the document he had signed with his own hand at our dining table. Sylvia tried, briefly, to insert herself into the proceedings through a letter prepared by her own attorney. The judge was entirely unimpressed. By the time everything was fully settled, Cole had walked away with his personal belongings, a fraction of what he had spent months hoping to gain, and a reputation that had quietly crumbled among the people who mattered most. Trisha brought wine the night it was officially over. We sat together on my porch and said very little. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my living room on a Saturday morning with a cup of tea and the windows wide open. I had repainted the walls a warm, clean white that made the whole space feel like something completely new. I had rearranged the furniture, replaced a few things and kept most others, because the house had always been mine and I had always genuinely loved it. There was no weight in the air anymore. No second-guessing my own words before I spoke them. No quietly studying someone else's expression to make sure I was saying exactly the right thing. Just the sound of birds outside, the smell of fresh morning air, and the steady certain knowledge that everything inside these walls belonged entirely to me. Cole was renting somewhere across town. I had heard, through someone who meant well, that things with Amber had not worked out the way either of them had hoped. Sylvia had apparently told several people in her circle that I had been difficult and deeply unfair throughout the whole situation. I heard that too. I smiled quietly and let it go. Because the thing they had never once understood, the thing that had been their single biggest mistake from the very beginning, was that I was never easy. I was just patient.